Hear from my friend Carl. Now I've been practicing Carl your name all day. I'm going to try it. Carl Duivenvoorden. I think everybody out there should say Duivenvoorden. Carl will be joining us live from New Brunswick. This presentation will be about 30 minutes long and will be followed by a 15-minute Q&A period. So if you have any questions, I invite you all to hold them to the end of the webinar. I'm going to now introduce Carl. Here we go. Carl, my friend, Duivenvoorden, doing pretty good, Carl, can recall being concerned about our global environment while growing up on a dairy farm in northern New Brunswick. In 2007, he became one of the first Canadians trained by former US Vice President Al Gore. He's been working as a speaker, writer, and sustainability consultant since then, helping people learn about our environmental challenges and what we can do about them. He's very excited today to be the kickoff presenter for this first reality climate webinar series. My friend Carl, take it away.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Lil. And good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be the kickoff speaker for tonight's, for this series here. And let me just get this first slide up. And we're good to go. Well, once again, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for taking some time to join us here this evening for this first presentation. And there's always so much to say and so little time. So let's get started, well, with a little reminder of this. Oh, planet Earth, the blue marble, an iconic photo taken by the astronauts on Apollo 17 back in 1972. Author Paul Hawken years ago wrote, "This planet came with a set of operating instructions, but we seem to have misplaced them. Important rules like don't poison the water, the soil, or the air, and don't touch the thermostat have been broken." So over the next 30 minutes, I'd like to focus on three simple questions. Must we change? Can we change? And will we change? So let's get started with the first one. And to do that, let's delve into a little bit of science. And it's about the importance of that thin blue band around our planet, our atmosphere, in regulating our climate. You see, we get all of our energy here on Earth from the sun, and it arrives in the form of light waves. They pass through the atmosphere and then they touch the surface of the Earth. But we know when we're outside in the sun, when the light hits us, it turns to heat when it touches us and it feels good. Well, the same thing happens on the surface of the Earth. The light turns to warmth, and that warmth warms planet Earth. But some of that heat also radiates right back up out into space, but not all of it. A portion of it is retained by our atmosphere, which functions as if it were a thin blue blanket all the way around planet Earth. And it keeps in just the right amount of heat to make this place the perfect place for life that it is, for us and for every other species with which we share the planet. Now that's a bit of deep science, and not everybody gets it, but most people get it when it's explained this way, because we've all sat in a car on a sunny day, and the windshield of a car works pretty much the same for the car as the atmosphere does for our planet. Because you see, energy from the sun, the light comes right through the windshield, turns to heat when it hits a surface in the car, us or something else. Much of that heat radiates right out, but a portion of it is retained by the windshield. And that's why the inside of a car is always warmer on a sunny day than outside, even in the winter. Well, something is happening out there to the chemistry of our thin blue blanket around planet Earth. And maybe the best way to illustrate it is with these three lines. Exponential growth curves. That's growth that's happening faster and faster and faster. In this case, they represent our consumption of fossil fuels, coal and natural gas. We first started consuming them at the start of the Industrial Revolution. They made life better. So we consumed more and more and more. We built more and more and more machines to do work for us. And today we're the luckiest generation ever because we have life better than anyone ever before us. And it's great, except along the way, we've been burning more and more and more oil, coal, and natural gas. And when we burn them, we produce emissions. One of them is carbon dioxide, which has quite an impact on our thin blue blanket. And it's not a poison. I mean, plants inhale it. The only thing is we've been producing so much carbon dioxide, the plants of the world can't keep up, and the levels in our atmosphere are rising. And to illustrate exponential growth, I'd like to share this with you, the significance of 1993. If you imagined all of the oil, coal, and natural gas consumed by humanity since the start of the Industrial Revolution, 50% of it has been consumed since 1993. That's the last 27 years. If you imagine the timeline from the start of the Industrial Revolution to today as 1 hour, half of everything consumed in that hour was consumed in the last 6 minutes. That's exponential growth. And if ever you've wondered why we have life so good now, well, there you have your answer. And it's to the point, well, how long does it now take to generate 1,000 tons of carbon dioxide emissions? Less than a second worldwide. Almost 100 million tons a day dumped into our atmosphere as if it were an open sewer. This is the pie chart of New Brunswick's emissions. And you see there are 3 big slabs there. If I had the pie chart of the Atlantic region here in Canada, in Atlantic Canada, pretty similar pie chart with 3 big slabs dominating. The first 2, they've got pretty large single sources behind them. Here in New Brunswick, the biggest single source emitters, well, there's an oil refinery putting out a ton every 10 minutes of the year. In other words, about the amount of time it takes to put up this slide, another ton of emissions. The second one is a coal-fired power plant, a ton every 13 seconds. When we go to Nova Scotia, 3 coal-fired power plants, the 3 largest single source emitters in Nova Scotia. We go to Newfoundland, well, it's an oil-fired power plant and an oil refinery. So you add all of our emissions up with the rest of the world, and well, here's that curve again. Exponential growth, it's the level of carbon dioxide in our global atmosphere, your thin blue blanket. And let's put a few numbers to this. When we started at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, we were coming through long-term stability in our atmosphere at about 277 parts per million. Fast forward to 1962, a very important year, at least for me, because it's the year I was born. Well, by then, we were already up to 320 parts per million. But you go to today and we're off the charts, 415 parts per million as of this week. And when you do the math on that, that means that basically 70% of that increase in carbon dioxide in our atmosphere has happened in my lifetime. And I don't even feel that old. Well, if it's true that so here's the concern. Could it be that by putting all of these emissions up into our atmosphere, we're affecting the chemistry of our thin blue blanket, making it act as if it were a thicker blue blanket, meaning that more heat stays and less radiates out to space and the planet warms up. And that in its simplest form is the science of climate change. Well, if that were happening, we ought to be seeing consequences, right? And we are. When I first started doing this work back in 2007, this was the slide I used. The hottest 7 years on record have included the past 6 years. But I regret that I've had to update this slide every year since, to the point where now it's the hottest 21 years on record, have included the past 20 years. Or maybe it's now easier just to say the new hottest 7 years on record, or once again, the past 7 years. And even we're seeing warming right in our part of the world. I mean, this isn't a scientific study here, but it's indicative of a trend. In weather, we'll always see records, right? Because weather is an unstable system. The only thing is, if our climate were stable, we should be seeing about the same number of new record high temperatures and new record low temperatures, right? Over December and January, across Atlantic Canada, we had 84 new record highs and 0 new record lows. Again, not scientific, but very indicative of a trend that we've been seeing in recent years. Well, that's temperature. But wait, if it was only temperature, climate change really wouldn't be such a big deal, right? Especially in January. You may have heard about the notion of sea level rise. Well, right here on this, you see that middle blue spot. That's the floating ice cap over the Arctic. And you may have heard, well, the Arctic ice is melting. Well, it's true, it is. The only thing is, it doesn't affect sea levels because you see, the Arctic ice is a lot like an ice cube in a glass of water. And when it melts, well, it's already displaced its weight, so it doesn't change the level of water in the glass. But see that second scenario? That's different. Or if you add a cube of ice to a glass of water, that raises the level of water in the glass. And you see right next to that big floating ice cube, we have a massive chunk of ice sitting high and dry on the land of Greenland, the size of Quebec. And at its thickest point, the ice on Greenland, 3 kilometers. That's 6 CN towers stacked one on top of the other. It's a lot of ice. It seems to go on forever. But we're starting to see this happen. And that water, well, when it melts, it runs off into the ocean, and that does affect sea level. And there's enough water locked up in Greenland to raise sea levels worldwide 5 or 6 meters, not centimeters, meters. But the real ice is at the other end of the planet, because there we've got about 10 times as much ice on a continent that is larger than Canada and has about 2 kilometers of ice on average. And we're seeing changes happen there too. There's a headline from 2 years ago. There's a headline from 2 days ago. When you live in a part of the world with that much coastline, sea level rise is a pretty big deal. And I'll finish it off with this slide. And I apologize for all the numbers, but I think it's important. Because you see, this is part of a study that was done a couple of years ago for our provincial government to try to gauge the impact of storm surges and rising sea level on New Brunswick's coasts. We have water on 3 sides. And this is a page from that report from the area on the Bay of Fundy near the city of St. John. And again, it's a lot of numbers. So let me zero in on the numbers that matter. In fact, there's one right there. See it? 5.34. Here's the significance. Back in 2010, you could expect a storm surge of 5.34 meters once every 100 years. Well, that was 11 years ago. We go ahead now to 2030. That's just 9 years from now. And you see a similar storm surge is now happening once every 25 years. Fast forward to 2050, 29 years from now, and it's happening every 5 years. And you go to 2100, and all of a sudden, and that's within the lifetime of babies born today, and all of a sudden, that 1 in a 100-year event is now a once-a-year event. And there's still more ice melting, and time doesn't end at 2100. So sea level rise is a really big deal. But unfortunately, there's a double whammy with climate change too, and that is more intensity in our weather systems too. Because you see, it's straight physics that when water warms, it evaporates more quickly. And when air warms, it can hold a bigger load of water, and it can dump bigger loads of water all of a sudden. And then we start to see these kinds of things happening. And when you combine sea level rise with more extreme weather events, well, then you've got a pretty big problem. And we're seeing more and more of these types of events, even to the point where, imagine this, in the long term, there is a risk that yet another of our Atlantic provinces will become an island. And, well, you heard my background is agriculture. Boy, if there's one thing that's chaotic for agriculture, it is crazy weather. And in 2018, in the fall, it seemed the rain never stopped. And farmers on PEI in particular had to abandon thousands of acres of potatoes. That's a lot of food. That's a lot of livelihoods as well. Ironically, the same heat that makes water evaporate from our oceans also makes water evaporate from land, meaning that we have longer and deeper droughts. And if you follow the news, well, you've heard about fires in Australia or in California. I mean, this is surreal, as is this noontime in San Francisco. Fortunately, we haven't had fires here, but we had a terrible drought this past summer. And in October, this is the post on Facebook that a potato farmer friend of mine put up. See those words? This rotten year 2020, worst crop than I can remember. That's frustration. And it's also a livelihood. And I could go on. I've already gone on too long on this, right? But there's so many other intertwined, interconnected consequences of climate change, from an invasive species to North Atlantic right whales that are now going further north for cooler waters and food and bumping into fishing gear and boats up there, to acidification of oceans and the impact on coral reefs, to just the unpleasantness of warm weather and mosquitoes bringing new diseases, all connected to more carbon dioxide in our atmosphere and a warming planet. And all of this interconnectedness reminds me of one of my favorite quotes. Man doesn't weave the web of life. He's merely a strand in it. Whatever he does to the web, he does to himself, because all things are connected. All things are connected. One last point before we move on here, and I think this is important. A couple of years ago, I was browsing the internet and I found this site, and it called out to me because it said, Carl, if you enter elements of your lifestyle, we'll calculate how much land it takes to sustain you. It caught my attention for two reasons. One, I was curious, but two, if I'm honest, it was a bit of vanity. Because you see, I'm the green guy, right? I live a sustainable lifestyle. So this thing will just flatter me and tell me how well I'm doing. So I did the little quiz. Only takes 5 minutes. And if you're interested, look up this site because it's awesome. So I answered a few simple questions. How big a house do you live in? How many people live in it? What kind of a car do you drive? How far do you drive it each year? What kind of food do you eat? How much do you waste? How much do you fly? Uh-oh, guilty pleasure. But I still did it, just a quick quiz, and I hit enter with confidence and maybe even a little bit of cockiness. And I was shocked. This thing came back and told me that if somebody on the planet lived like me, we would need 4 planets. 4. There are no 4 planets. Later on, I found out that essentially that's our Canadian footprint. If everyone lived like a Canadian, we'd need 4 planets. So it set me on a journey to strive to live as lightly as I can on the planet in every element of my life. I can tell you it's a journey that's still ongoing. But maybe that brings us to a point then here. Must we change? Sure hope the answer is clear after that. So then, well, can we change? Well, in order to figure that out, let's start with taking a look at where we're headed if we follow the scenario of business as usual. That's where our emissions are headed, in fact, exponentially up. But if we listen to the world's brightest minds on climates, the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, this is where we need to go, net zero by 2050. Any way you look at that, that is a steep curve downward if we want to keep temperatures from rising more than 1.5 degrees. And right about now, you're looking at that and you're saying, man, I sure wish there was some magic cable that we could just plug into and get all the green energy we need. Unfortunately, as far as we know, there is no one single technology that can help bend that line down to where it needs to go. But the good news is there are all kinds of smaller technologies which can bend that line down a bit. And if we put them all together, we can get that line down to 2050 quite comfortably. What are those technologies? Well, they're not complicated for the most part. Most of them start with the same 2 words: more efficient vehicles, homes, commercial buildings, public transit systems, urban design, and one really big chunk, more renewable energy. And here's where there's some really good news, because this is where exponential growth works our way. See those green bars in that little inset? That's the cost of wind power. Down, 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 very quickly. The red line, those are installations of wind power. They're going gangbusters. Back in 2000, it was projected that worldwide capacity would reach 30 gigawatts. That's a lot of power by 2010. The reality, by 2019, that goal was exceeded 22 times over. Lots of wind power. Here's one of the newest projects in Atlantic Canada being built this summer just outside St. John. 10 new wind turbines being built this summer. And then the other big part of renewable energy is solar. And this too is going crazy in terms of price reduction, as you can see on that little inset, and also in uptake. Because back in 2002, the projection was the market will grow by 1 gigawatt per year by 2010. Instead, reality was 17 times over. Fast forward to 2019, and it was exceeded 121 times over. So solar is just really taking off. And it took the snowball a little while to get started rolling, but it is rolling here too in Atlantic Canada. PEI has a wonderful program for helping people, homeowners, install solar. $1,000 per kilowatt in assistance. Financing even available, 15 years financing at 5%. It's an awesome program. Nova Scotia has a program as well. This is a solar panel of my friend Lil, who introduced me. Lil just had this built this summer, and she said she enjoys looking at her solar panel with a glass of local beer and some local potato chips as well. This is a solar panel on the farmers market down in Wolfville in the Annapolis Valley that was switched on for the first time in 2018. And this is a wonderful at Timber River Eco Farm. So potato farm, co-owned by climate reality leader Jonathan Coomer down near Sackville, New Brunswick. And this is neat. This is a joint campaign that's being done to green our power grid, a partnership between the Ecology Action Center in Halifax and the Conservation Council of New Brunswick, showing that the economics are there for us to move aggressively now to a non-carbon power grid. Remember, that's the big slice. Of course, renewable energy requires a little backup and a smart grid because it's intermittent. But here, so much is happening too. I mean, batteries are progressing like crazy. And this is, I think, still the world's biggest battery pack. It's a huge Tesla pack built in Australia, right next to this wind farm, the Hornsdale Power Reserve. And it takes surplus power from those wind turbines when the wind's blowing and the grid doesn't need it. The batteries are charged full, and then later on, when the grid needs extra power, and usually that's at breakfast time and at supper time, those batteries feed it in, and the utility doesn't have to fire up a coal plant or a gas plant. And it's been working so well that they're putting in a bunch more in Australia. And, well, they're coming here too, because St. John Energy is installing one, and they're not the first either, because Summerside PEI deserves kudos. Summerside first put this solar array online back in 2017. And it's one of the progressive communities, not just in our region, but in the country. They're building a massive additional solar array this coming summer. And in fact, that's just one part of the package of things that they do in Summerside. They've got wind energy. They built 4 massive wind turbines. I think it was in 2009. They have solar power. They have energy storage, electric vehicles, all kinds of charging stations, efficient buildings. Summerside is doing all kinds of things right. And one of the neat things, you see, I mentioned energy storage, battery and thermal there. This is a technology that they are piloting, the Stash Energy heat pump. And it's a heat pump that draws and stores the heat that it produces inside, and then blasts that heat into your room in the morning when you get up. See, the thing is, overnight on the power grid, there's all kinds of power available. So if you can use overnight power and then reduce the demand early in the morning, you're saving a lot of power overall and a lot of emissions. The neat thing, Stash Energy is based right here in Fredericton. It's a company, a new startup, started by 3 bright young engineering grads of the University of New Brunswick. And then, boy, you got to put a plug in for Halifax, because Halifax has Halifax climate together. Well, it's too much to cover in a webinar like this. It is one of the most comprehensive programs to bring that city's operations, at least the municipality's operations, down to net zero by 2050, and all kinds of programs reaching into all areas of sustainability. It's a pretty impressive thing. Back in New Brunswick, we have the Shediac Smart Energy Community Project that's happening. And it's a partnership of the utilities in our region too. And in Shediac, homes are being equipped with smart energy technology. So all the data you need to know how to manage your power. There's a solar community farm that is going up this summer. And a couple of big buildings in Shediac are being retrofitted to be net zero buildings, just to prove that we can do it here. It's really neat. And just last fall, this was also announced, a new neighborhood that's going to be constructed in Moncton, where all the homes are net zero, or at least net zero ready. So they will be what we call little nano grids, isolated energy islands where they produce their own energy, but connected to their neighbors in what's called a microgrid, and then the whole thing is connected to the larger power grid. It's very progressive, and it's very, very exciting as well. Well, let's take a look at that third big slice of our emissions pie. And here's some really good news happening. I mean, electric vehicles depend on batteries, and battery prices have been dropping like a rock, with breakthroughs happening, well, all the time. And it's nice to put a plug in for this. There's a partnership between Dalhousie University and Tesla that is at the leading edge of battery technology. And well, this is what's been happening globally in terms of the uptake of electric vehicles and hybrid electric vehicles too. And if you haven't gone for a ride in an EV yet, you owe it to yourself to go, because you know, sometimes sustainability is equated with sacrifice. There is nothing of a sacrifice about going for a ride in a Tesla. I can assure you, they are glorious rides. And you know, the price of EVs is coming down to the point where they're way cheaper to operate than gas vehicles. And in Norway, they have put a few policies in place so now they're cheaper to buy and cheaper to operate. And the market has flipped just like that. And you know, maybe the biggest proof of how fast things are changing will be this Sunday. If you watch the Super Bowl, look for GM's ad. Look for GM's new logo. If you look closely, it's got a stylized electric plug in it. And their ad, 90 seconds, all about electric vehicles coming down the pipes. EVs are coming fast. And it's great to see here in Atlantic Canada, we're ready for them. Those are all the charging stations across our region. And it's so nice to see the latest edition. That's all those orange pins on Newfoundland. A network of fast charging stations now under construction all along the Trans-Canada Highway, right across Newfoundland from Port aux Basques to St. John's. Well, here's a final word on this. You know, Joe Biden is saying this too. Climate solutions are jobs. And there is so much prosperity to be had with converting ourselves to decarbonization in a renewable energy world. You know, one of the nicest things about renewable energy, once we install the infrastructure, the fuel is free. Solar energy is free. The sun never sends a bill. The wind is free. So all we have to do is just install it, and we're there. So can we change? Well, I hope the answer to that one is pretty obvious by now too. So here's the big one. Will we change? Maybe we need to look in the mirror on that one. Back in 2015, this was the official photo of the Paris, taken at the end of the Paris Climate Accord. So serious, so staid, right? So formal. Maybe this should have been the official photo, the celebration of it all, because it was a massive accomplishment. For the first time, virtually every country in the world came together and committed to climate action. And that was such a great thing. But we're not quite there yet, because there are two issues with the Paris Accord. One, unfortunately, most of the commitments made aren't strong enough to bend that line down to where it needs to go. We need to up our ambition, virtually every country, and some are stepping up now. And secondly, an awful lot of the countries that made commitments aren't achieving the commitments that they did make, including us. I mean, I believe that our Prime Minister gets climate change, but maybe he needs to hear more from us to make sure that he feels he has the backing to act strongly. Same goes for the premiers. I'm not as convinced they all get climate change, but boy, they all have a big role to play in getting us through climate change. So then you're wondering, well, okay, what can I do about it? Well, here are 10 of the best things that you can do to help fight climate change. And if you want, you can just Google the 10 best actions, David Suzuki Foundation, and you can find that page. Whenever I have a minute, I'll paste that page in the chat of our, as soon as I'm finished here, I'll paste the page, but you can go look for it yourself too. And there's a lot more information on each of those, but get politically engaged, talk to your leaders, conserve energy, green your commute, walk, bike, take the bus. Those are the best. Change your diet if necessary, eat your veggies, consume less, waste less. RRSP time is coming, invest in renewables, divest from fossil fuels. If you can, build your own renewable energy source. Talk with people. Not everybody is at the party yet when it comes to climate change acceptance. Support movements, vote. Make climate change your #1 issue. And if that makes you uncomfortable, if that sounds a bit like activism, well, join the crowd. I don't feel comfortable at all in an activist role, but I'm deeply inspired by something I read by Kathy Mattea. This is Kathy. She's a Grammy Award-winning musician. And I met her at a climate reality training a number of years ago. And then I read this on her blog. Kathy wrote, "I am and have always been a reluctant activist. I don't want to rock the boat, but the universe keeps putting this stuff on my plate in a way I cannot deny. And I don't want to play small in my life anymore in any area." That speaks to me, and I hope it speaks to you too. And I hope it helps you overcome any reluctance you might have about becoming active. I'm just about ready to wrap up, but I wanted to share this one last thing with you. I think it was 4 years ago, I was listening to a radio program. It was a phone-in program. And a lady called in and she started talking about how she had an electric vehicle and it was charged by solar panels that she had on her roof. And I almost fell off my chair. I thought, that's so cool. I want that. But it seemed so far away. It seemed so impossible. It seemed so complicated. Well, fast forward 4 years, and there's a photo that I took outside this fall of the electric vehicle our family drives now and the new solar array that we have in our yard. And I put it up, I hope it's not to brag, it's to make 2 points. One, look, honestly, if I can do this, anyone can do it. If I can do it, anyone can do it. And the other thing, 4 years ago, this seemed so impossible, but change is also exponential. So if that was 4 years ago to today, imagine what's possible 4 years from now. Years ago, when I was leaving home for university, I was all fired up and I was going to change the world. And well, I'm not sure all of us can change the world, but this is some of the best advice I've ever gotten in my life. It's from my dear mom. And mom might be listening out there. Mom turned 96 just last month. And if mom was there, when I left home for university, mom said to me, "Carl, maybe you can't change the whole world, but you can change your little corner of it." And you know what? I really believe in the power of one committed individual to make a difference. So what the heck? Why not me, right? And why not any one of us? Folks, thank you so much for sticking with me this long. We went through 3 questions. I hope the answers to the first 2 were very clear to you, maybe even before this started. And I hope above all, the answer to the 3rd is now also a resounding yes, we will change. And with that, thanks again, and I'll turn it back to Lil.
Wow. Oh my gosh, Carl. My heart. That's all I can say. That was really something. And I'm sure everybody out there is just as emotional feeling than as I am. I'm inspired. I'm upset. I'm scared. I'm hopeful. I'm hungry. Wow. I'm everything right now. And I've just learned so much. And you took me on this journey, and everybody on this amazing journey. You brought the reality of what's happening to the climate. And I know you and I were down there on a training together. And when I went down there first, I remember it was like, we can't get to 400. We can't get to 400 parts per million. This is, oh my gosh. And we were at 390, and now we're way over. So it's, to see this continue is really quite terrifying and paralyzing. But you brought us in, you took us to the solution, and now I'm all hopeful, and you got me wound up, which doesn't take much. And I was at the Paris. I was there when they signed that deal, and people were crying. But I did notice that people really, the whole world there's a big green tsunami. We are doing this. We are the change, and God help us. We're gonna get this done, because failure is not an option. Stash energy, and I really challenge people to do the global footprint, which is really, I like that. That's good. We all should do that, and I think we all will. But holy geez, I got to keep this rolling here. Fantastic, Carl. Oh my gosh. So before we move on to the questions, I'd like to give the floor to Marg Milburn, another climate reality leader based in New Brunswick, who'd like to have a few minutes to share and talk about the work they've been doing in the province, very exciting work, to help pass an environmental bill of rights. Right on, Marg. The floor is yours, dear.
Okay. And this is going to be the shortest presentation ever. Okay, thank you. I am part of the New Brunswick Environmental Rights Caucus, and I'm going to speak about our proposed Children's Environmental Bill of Rights for New Brunswick. This is a made in New Brunswick solution that could become a catalyst for sustainability in New Brunswick. It would protect the environment, reduce greenhouse gases, protect children's health from environmental harm and the health of all New Brunswickers, protect future generations, contribute to people's livelihoods and a green economy, and therefore create a more sustainable New Brunswick. The issue: children in the world's population are suffering and dying from the effects of global environmental disruption, pollution, and the climate crisis. We are all going through a pandemic which was caused by humans interfering in natural systems. New Brunswick has also suffered from loss of lives, millions of dollars of damage, and losses due to the cumulative impacts of the climate crisis, pollution, and COVID-19. The goals and intent of our act. In June 2019, the New Brunswick Environmental Rights Caucus brought together 10 environmental groups to work towards the establishment of a child-focused New Brunswick Bill of Rights that would ensure that all New Brunswickers and future New Brunswickers have the right to a healthy environment. Members of the caucus drafted a New Brunswick Bill of Rights that, if enacted, would ensure that children, and therefore all New Brunswickers and future generations, have the right to a healthy environment. It would also spell out government's duties to protect New Brunswickers' environmental rights, including doing so in accordance with private trust law. It would ensure all New Brunswickers have access to necessary environmental information and be able to fully and meaningfully participate in environmental decision-making, and provide mechanisms for New Brunswickers to obtain legal remedies to prevent or redress harm. We presently have support from many organizations, including the Canadian Association of Nurses for the Environment, the Canadian Associations for Physicians for the Environment, and happily, we've just been endorsed by Climate Reality Canada, Project Canada. So we're really happy about you guys supporting us. Why are we focusing on children? We know that the health of children and their future are intimately linked to the health of the planet. And yet the future of today's children has never been so uncertain. Our focus on children is in the alignment with the World Health Organization, UNICEF, Lancet Commission, who in February 2020 presented their case for placing children at the heart of sustainability and our shared human endeavor. Scientific research demonstrates that children 0 to 6 and the unborn fetus are more vulnerable than adults to environmental harm. There was a recent study that was called plasticenta, instead of placenta, plasticenta, where microplastics were found in the placenta and cord blood of babies. Babies are being born pre-polluted. It's horrible. Ella Kissy Deborah, who was on our previous slide, a 9-year-old girl from London, UK, was the first person to have air pollution listed as cause of death on her death certificate. This just breaks my heart. 7 million people die from air pollution a year, and these deaths are preventable. We have obligations under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which recognizes children have rights and freedoms that need to be protected. The executive director of UNICEF has stated that there is no greater growing threat facing the world's children and their children's children than the climate crisis. We knew instinctively that we must protect children, but also have the data and the experts supporting us. So on the next slide, Carl, we have the link for the actual bill. Yeah, so on the left-hand side where it's NBEN, that's where you can find the Bill of Rights. So you can check that out. And my email's in the middle. So if you have any questions, you can just send me an email or feedback. And then we are going to have a virtual launch of the Bill of Rights on Earth Day, April 22nd. And we will send out information about that when we have it. So save that date, April 22nd. Thank you. That's like the fastest. We have a really long presentation of that. So I did a really nutshell presentation.
You're fantastic at the nutshell. But again, that presentation is horrifying and infuriating and terrifying and all that. And I just had a grandson, and I'm very interested in food additives and what we're feeding our children. And we got lots of work to do, that's for sure. Carl, are you ready for some questions?
I am set to go.
Can you see the questions down there?
I just opened a box here with 3 of them.
Okay. Do you want to take them on and maybe tell who's asking the questions? Do you want to take
Sure. Well, sure, I can start at least. I see Beryl LeMay wrote, are buildings in Atlantic Canada heated by electricity? And is that why NV emissions for buildings account for only 6% of the total? That's correct. For the most part, the heating in New Brunswick is electric heat. A little bit less so in Nova Scotia PEI. I think their oil has a bit more of a role. Newfoundland, I think it's mostly electric too, but here, definitely mostly electric. Laurent Cousineau. Hi, Laurent. He's wondering, what's your opinion on nuclear power? James Hansen, a famous climatologist, says we need it to reach 100% clean energy. You know, I'm not dogmatically opposed to nuclear. I worry about the waste left behind, that's for sure. And it seems to me we have a responsibility if we're going to use nuclear power, we got to clean up our mess. But I think there's a larger issue as well that maybe is more broadly appealing to most, and that is I don't think there's ever been a nuclear plant in the world that's come in on time, on budget. And when we see solar and wind coming down so low, I mean, I'm deeply respectful of Dr. Hansen because he was one of the first ones to sound the alarm bell. But you know, it could be that technology of wind and solar happening so fast will supersede that need for nuclear power. And I kind of hope so, because you can build a wind turbine or a solar array pretty quickly. It takes about 20 years to get a nuclear plant from drawing board actually onto the grid.
Yeah, and didn't Al Gore talk about, I remember him saying once, it just takes too long. We don't have the time. Sometimes my husband worked at Darlington Nuclear Station, believe it or not, and not for very long, I'm glad to say. And it was a long journey. And he said sometimes they take 10 years. We just don't have that time. So I was wondering what you're going to say with that one.
Yeah, and then the last one by the name of Anonymous says a lot of emphasis is put on individual action. What can citizens do as a collective? Well, there are so many things, you know. I think it was Al Gore who said it's important to change light bulbs, but it's more important to change laws. And really, when it comes down to it, everybody needs to be in on this one, you know. Sailing a ship through a storm, all hands on deck. But the big thing is we do need good policies to guide us, and good policy decisions can change things very quickly. I mean, that's the reason why EVs are leading in Norway. It's the government's policy choices. So it's up to us to push our political leaders, and that's where collective action comes in. I think if you look back to those 10 items on the list from David Suzuki Foundation, some of them talked about calling your leaders, getting involved in movements, and making bloody well sure that you vote and make this a top issue. I hope that helps.
Wow.
Those are
Well,
the 3 questions I see. Lil, I
yeah,
don't know if there are any others
I
hidden
think
away.
we're good. Well, I think after that question, I think we're supposed to wrap this up. We don't want to hang. I can talk to you all night, Carl, and I know we could speak about this. You're just looking at the chat here. Lots of wonderful comments, Carl. Fantastic job. It's just great. I mean,
before I go, if I could,
oh yes,
if I could, Lil, I'm going to put it to all panelists and attendees. There is the link that I mentioned to the 10 action items from the David Suzuki Foundation. And they're very good with elaboration through them, but they hit all the main things, you know? They hit all the main things.
Absolutely. Well, this is just
if I could, Lil, sorry. I
sometimes
do gab on a little longer, but I think I saw a few chats coming by wondering about the slides. And for anyone who's interested, I can't share the whole deck, but I'd be happy to share a few slides. And maybe the easiest thing is, would you just email me? I didn't put my email up on a slide, but it's very simple. Carl with a C, Carl@changeyourcorner.com. Carl@changeyourcorner.com.
We're going to change our corner, Carl. Carl's going to change our corner. Well, thank you so much for everybody that came, and Carl, you're amazing as always. And if a few more things that I want to wrap stuff up here. Wow, what a night here! But just before we wrap stuff up, I want to mention that to let you know that there's I want to let you know that we have 2 main programs. If you want to get involved, whether or not you're a trained reality presenter or not, you can do this. The first one is the Community Climate Hub Initiative, is a network of citizen-led groups. We have a great one here in Halifax, and creating a space for meaningful participation in a democratic decision-making process. To see if a hub exists in your area, or to start one yourself, which would be great, head to www. I think Emma Jean's going to put that up on there, www.climatehub.ca. That'll come up on the chat there. And 2, a Campus Core initiative is a student-led program that helps academic institutions become more responsible members of the community. To do this, Campus Core chapters have 3 main goals. 1, push for greener practices on campus, right on. 2, bring administrations to divest from fossil fuels. We're all big on that one. 3, push for climate justice to be deeply ingrained in academic curriculums. I'd like to add, can we grow on the lawn? I think we should do that. We are currently leading our pilot year consisting of 3 university level campuses with the ultimate goal of expanding into other campuses and into levels of education. We currently have 2 of our 3 pilot student groups formed, and if you'd like to help shape the 3rd or wish to stay in the loop for future expansions of the program, please head to, and I think Emma Jean's going to put this up, the Climate Core. Hopefully she'll put that up on the link there in the chat. Climate Reality CA Campus Core. She's going to put that up for you, that link. And if you'd like more information on our climate reality projects here in Atlantic Canada and presentations in general, I invite you to email me and see what's going on in Atlantic Canada. Hey, Carol, we'll all get this done. My email should be up there too. It's LilyMac, pretty easy. LilyMac, LILLYMAC41 @hotmail.com. So that's it for tonight, but join us for more inspiring stories on the next webinars that are coming up. It's March 18th in Quebec at 6:30 Eastern Standard Time. So, well, wow, what an evening. Thank you for joining. I wore my Be the Change shirt. So let's all be the change. Let's all just talk about it all the time. I know it's in our hearts. I know we can do this. We have to do this. Let's build a beautiful, fun green movement, because it is. Carl's right. We don't have to suffer. We can drive our electric cars and eat better food, and we can breathe fresher air, and it's going to be good. We just got to get there. Anyway, good night, and be safe, and don't get the COVID.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Take
Mark.
care. Stay safe. Thanks,
Care.
guys.